Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about Nocardia. Nocardia is a filamentous bacteria. It's found in the dirt. There's actually three main families of filamentous bacteria that exist in the dirt. Now, I'm saying all of this, and my scientist and lab tech friends are going to come in and say, Barrett, you didn't have that exactly right, or you're not entirely accurate. But from a layman's perspective, you've got three basic filamentous bacteria groups that live in the soil. They're the real common. I don't remember the names of the other two. Nocardia is the most common. It's the most prevalent. Actually, if you drive past a field of freshly tilled earth and you get that good fresh dirt smell, what you're smelling is those filamentous bacteria, or rather the compounds that they release. So filamentous bacteria are not great for a wastewater plant. They're a big pain. And as everything is in wastewater, there is no 100% fix or 100% this is the way this is versus this is the way this is. What I mean by that is you have beneficial organisms in the wastewater treatment plant that do a good job of eating up the wastewater or eating up the waste in the wastewater and breaking that down so that you can separate out the waste from the water and you get clean water off the top. To think that you can have a wastewater plant that has no filamentous bacteria in it, no, they're always there. But the conditions in the water, the makeup of the water, the fat, oil, and grease load, food loading, the pH in the water, all these things impact how the microorganisms act. And the conditions that you want for your beneficial organisms, if you have the conditions where the beneficial organisms are happy, the non-beneficial organisms like filamentous bacteria, they don't like those conditions, so they're greatly reduced. They're not doing a whole lot. They're just maybe a handful of them milling around. If the conditions in your plant change so that the conditions are where the beneficial organisms are unhappy, that makes the non-beneficial organisms very happy. And they get excited and they start multiplying. And so it's all about how your conditions are in your water. If your water conditions are at X, your beneficial organisms are happy. If your water conditions are at Q, then your non-beneficial organisms get happy and your beneficial organisms go to sleep or die off. Their colony count is greatly reduced and the non-beneficial organisms are increased. So at that industrial plant that I was working at, we had a conditions in our plant change, and temperature affects it, pH affects it, your fat, oil, and grease load affects it, your loading in the plant, like your food loading in the plant affects it. And we were getting hit pretty hard. We were overloaded. The pH was not where we wanted it. We had a temperature change. I think it was around October, and so temperature was changing. And anyway, the Nocardia got extremely happy. Now, in your wastewater process, as your microorganisms are working on the food sources in the wastewater, they're releasing gases. And there's a list of gas. You think hydrogen sulfide and methane and ammonia. And like I said, there's a list of them. But as these gases are bubbling to the surface, you'll get little bubbles on the surface of your irrigation lagoon. You get like a little foam. And if everything's running right, the foam is light and kind of crispy, and the little bubbles just boop, 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 just kind of serving pop, pop, pop. And it kind of looks like the water's sparkling out there. If your conditions are not great and the non-beneficial organisms take over, the bubbles get thicker and kind of waxier, and they blow, blow, and they get big and swell. And your filamentous bacteria, if you look at them under a microscope, there's one called, is it Crenothrix? Anyway, some of them look like sticks. Some of them look like spaghetti. But when you look at it under a microscope, it looks like either like microscopic little branches of a tree, or it might look like a pile of sewing needles, or it might look like spaghetti. But those filamentous bacteria, being long, slender particles, they'll be in the surface of the bubble. And so it acts like a framework for the bubble. And so your bubble, which is already kind of thick and waxy because of the fats, oils, and greases, say, now it's got structure to it. So think like a geodesic dome, and the bubbles can get real big and they're real hard to break, and like heavier than a soap bubble, like real sticky. So as those bubbles, when they finally do pop, they'll kind of deflate and then make more, more air gets under them and makes more bubbles. And before long, and like short amount of time, a day, maybe two, you start to get this thick, sticky biologic foam on the surface of the water, on the surface of your clarifiers. And I mean, it's like the consistency of whipped cream. I don't know what it's like. It's awful. It's sticky. The only way to remove it is mechanical removal. So like you can try and use, say, a vacuum pump and suck it off the surface, and the vacuum will cause the bubbles to break and it kind of thin out some and get more liquidy. Then you've got to do something with it. You've got to move it away from your process, put it out on a big plastic pad or something and let it dry up, or you got to do something with it. You can't recycle it back into the pond, or you're just recreating the problem. Where you can try and take, like scrapers and scrape it off the surface and get it over to the edge of your clarifier and scoop it out with shovels. Or what we were using was, on the clarifier, you had a rake that went around the surface and cleaned the trash particles off and dropped them into a little lift station. So we were using that lift station as like a collection basin, and so it was scraping off the Nocardia and dropping it into this little basin, and then we were using pumps and vacuums to get it out of that smaller basin. But what finally wound up fixing the problem was doing several things to correct the conditions in the wastewater. Temperature leveling out helped, getting more efficiency out of the DAF, removing more fat, oil, and grease before it got into the system, which required using more polymers, which getting filamentous bacteria into your plant can be a real headache. I don't guess there's really a point to this story other than keep a close eye on your plant, because if filamentous bacteria get in there, good luck. You've got a fight ahead of you. Thanks for watching, guys. God bless. Have a good day. And remember, like and subscribe.